Welcome to the podcast, Soulful Thoughts from Ireland. My name, Meghan Dawn. My work, writing, mentoring, and mystic teaching, bringing the ancient past and earth wisdom into our present reality. Recently, I was on a magical pilgrimage in Glendalough, County Wicklow. And from this journey, I have created a virtual meditation pilgrimage for you to embark upon, complete with images, poems, prayers, videos, so that you get the full experience as much as possible, no matter where you are. I invite you to join with me on your own sacred and magical journey. You can find this on my website at meghandawn.life. And while in Glendalough, I had some wonderful adventures with Rosaleen Durkin, who has dedicated herself to bringing back the wisdom of the well and has done much research around the wells in County Wicklow. We are fortunate to have Rosaleen as our special guest today. Welcome, Rosaleen. Thanks so much for being with us.
You are very welcome, and I'm really happy to be talking to you about one of my favorite topics.
Wonderful, me too. So, just to give a little sense of background here, Ireland and Scotland have the highest number of wells worldwide. So, well worship has been an integral part of ancient life and continues through to this day. So, that's quite remarkable that Ireland and Scotland have the highest number. And in Ireland itself, it's known to have over 3,000 wells, which is quite remarkable, each associated with a particular saint and providing stories of miraculous healings. So originally, a large number of the wells were dedicated to St. Bridget, and many of them, unfortunately, have been usurped by St. Patrick. Yet the initial dedications even go further back to the very goddess of the land herself. So, really, I'd like to begin with a quote here. This quote comes from the book The Little Prince. Look, I beg you, don't ever stop looking, because what makes the world so lovely is that somewhere it hides a well that hasn't been found yet. And if you don't find it, maybe nobody will. Now, this quote is absolutely perfect for our guest Rosaleen today, because Rosaleen, you have been rediscovering old and forgotten wells in County Wicklow. And you've done so much research, had so many adventures. So can you just speak a little bit here, like what energy drew you to this work, or who do you think was asking you to bring back these ancient places and practices, and how did you find them?
Okay, well, that's an interesting one. How I got interested was, I think I didn't go looking for the wells. I think the wells found me, but so it wasn't my mind going, "Oh, I must do this." But one of the things that I'm very grateful for now is I grew up in County Mayo on a farm. And I think a lot of the knowledge is in my bones, but I didn't realize that until I was much older. So I grew up with a certain amount of folklore. I grew up with the traditions of the wells. So I was at the end of that era in the 60s and 70s when it was actually still quite alive, like superstitions and fairies and folklore and all the death rituals. So I had a certain amount of that. But as I grew up, I probably was like any teenager or 20-year-old. I really wasn't interested. I probably wanted to get away from it. So later on, when I moved to Glendalough, we were doing a midsummer festival. I was part of an arts group, and one of the jobs I got to do was check what were the traditions of midsummer. And one of the traditions of midsummer was to go to a holy well and clean it, or go to wells in general and clean them, and to give thanks for clean water. And that just really stuck in my mind, because I thought, but that's as relevant now as it was 100 years ago, to give thanks for clean water, because that's a problem in lots of places now, is actually having clean drinking water. So I started researching the well in Glendalough, St. Kevin's Well. And then a group of us over coffee one morning said, one of my friends said, "Oh, why don't we just check out the other wells in Wicklow?" Which we thought was a really interesting idea. We'll check how many more are there. So when we checked it out, there were 120 just in Wicklow alone, 120, 130. So that idea in 2015 is still an ongoing project, but and I got interested probably from a spiritual point of view, a photography point of view, and a folklore point of view.
Fabulous. How fantastic. 120 wells alone in Wicklow. I love that. And I particularly love that the well called you, and isn't that the way I think with a true calling? It's something other is calling us and we're drawn. So, well, here and now, I'd just like to say thank you for listening to the call and following it. I think that's just beautiful what you're doing, drawing back the original energy. And I know, it's been an ancient practice to go to the well for healing. So would you like to speak a little bit about the healing of the wells and the healing of humans, the healing of the earth? Like, how have you found that? How do you experience that?
Well, I found that, if you look at life now with all of the stresses and all of the worries and all of the problems, so if you go back in time, people had a ritual that you had a place to go to. So that could be a mountain, it could be a well, it could be a church, it could be, but even a lot of that is even in chaos with churches, even now as we speak, so it's really creating any kind of a space. So even the ritual now, some people can go to a church and light a candle, that is a ritual. Or you go to a well with your problem and you're, number one, acknowledging there is a problem, that you're actually sitting down, I do have a problem and I need help. And even that is really, it frees up the mind, because if we're just thinking and thinking and thinking about a problem, well, the problem's just going to keep going round and round. Whereas if you create a ritual, go, I'm going somewhere, I'm putting a symbol of the problem there, I'm handing it over to something bigger than me, and I'm leaving, not without it, but I'm leaving with a different version of the story. And then also, the wells would have been seen as a blessing. So you went to give thanks as well. You didn't just go with problems. So you went to give thanks. You used the water for blessing your home, blessing your family, blessing your cattle, blessing your garden. And that's why there's a huge, huge, huge need for the rituals of it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, that the ritual, and it just needs to be simple, right? It doesn't
Very simple, yeah.
doesn't need to be a big, huge, elaborate ritual. I know you've spoken that even if we just go and sit at a sacred place for 5 minutes, and that if we go to the well and bring our intention and sit there, we are helping to keep the well sacred. We are helping to keep that energy alive. So it's like the well gets healed and brought alive as much as we get healed and brought alive, right? It's
absolutely. And actually, that point you just made there is that what I've understood from working with the wells is it's a two-way relationship. So we're healing the well, but the well is healing us. But so it's a little bit like, I see the wells a bit like a person. So a lot of them are totally ignored, totally neglected, totally overgrown. Nobody visits. It's a bit like somebody who's just abandoned in a way. So on that level, when you change the energy in the landscape, the people around the well also change, because the energy is now open, and they go, oh, I never noticed that well, or I didn't understand the story. So it's a bit like an ancestral story as well.
Right, right, right. Do you want to speak a little bit more about the ancestral healing? Because I know this is a huge issue, I think, actually worldwide right now. The ancestral trauma it seems to be rising up from the very bones of the earth and coming through all of us, coming through our heritage and very often what I'm finding is we don't even recognize it's ancestral. We think it's like just our own little personal problem, but it's so much bigger. Do you want to speak a little more on that?
Absolutely. And I think the more I'm doing my work, I do kinesiology work, but I do a lot of work now with ancestral healing. And I've also done quite a number of years of ancestral healing in my own family. And what I've realized was I didn't realize the stories of my ancestors, just how difficult their lives were and the trauma they went through. But when I look at them as people and realize they were very strong people, but that still leaves an energetic mark in the descendants. That could be it could be failure, it could be poverty, it could be survival, it could be sadness, it could be depression, alcoholism. So a lot of the energies, particularly I've noticed, say things like alcoholism or suicide, where there's a lot of repeating patterns in the family. If you go back, there's usually something quite challenging. And then you bring in, say in Ireland, you have the story of you've colonization, you've got the famine, you've got mass immigration. So when I was growing up in Mayo, because I was really sensitive as a child, there's a sadness from immigration because basically people left. They call them American wakes.
Oh,
So you basically, your child, you had an American wake, which they were called American wakes, but they were actually a party too before they left because they never lost. The parents never saw their children again.
that's
So,
heartbreaking.
yeah. So say in my family, my grandmother, all her children left at 18,
Yeah.
and maybe one of them, I don't think she ever saw. Maybe saw her once, maybe when she went to America, but that was quite normal because the the economy just wasn't there. So that was so. But if you think of the landscape was sad. Now that's all changing because people are moving back and the economy is better and people can travel by plane. But if you go back to the 50s and 60s, there was no Skype, there was no Zoom, there was no phones, people didn't have money to travel. So I think in terms of the ancestral healing, and you would have felt it at some of the wells we went to as well, in the ground. Now, again, when I started to work with the wells in Wicklow, I hadn't really understood the history of Wicklow because I didn't grow up there, but there was a rebellion in 1798. So a lot of the wells, if we had been in 1798 at St. Felix well, we would have been arrested. So there's a fear of going to the wells because it was called a political gathering. And a lot of them stopped after 1798. They actually never came back. So the memory in the kind of local consciousness was don't go there.
Right. And just for our listeners to also to speak this, because some people won't know the history, to have a mass was considered illegal, and priests were even hung if they were discovered saying mass. And these were illegal gatherings, and people were shot, people were hung, people were, children and mothers. And so, and what I'm catching on here is what you spoke, the sadness in the landscape. The sadness in the landscape because of the blood that was actually going into the soil
Yeah.
from these lives. And I know that Rosaleen very generously offered to take me to some of the wells and sort of said, well, here's some, take a look. Which ones do you want to go to? And there was one in particular, I was very keen to go to St. Felix well. And maybe, Rosalie, you can give your version of your initial reaction to my request and
Okay.
what your experience was there, and then I'll give my experience going.
Okay. So what's interesting, because when I'm working with the wells, each well I see each well having a story. So some wells can have a very light energy, or somebody is looking after them, or people are visiting. And so the more challenging ones we have to work with are the ones that are pretty much 100% gone, or we have to dig them back up because the water flow is gone, or the ones where the locals have maybe disconnected from it, so it's nearly invisible, or the energy can just be heavy because there is maybe a story going back historically. So the one you're talking about, St. Faith's Well, um, it's one of the ones I'm really happy that we are working with, because it's really beautiful. The water is flowing, the water is really clear, but nobody really goes there. It's totally open to the public. It's beside a public road. There's place to park, but there's kind of a sadness at it, or it's just a little bit stuck. So the very first time we went there, we put up a stone, and but I found the energy of the place a little bit heavy for me. So I knew there was more work to be done on it. So when you said about, you picked that as one of the ones, my first initial response was, oh God, no, because I knew I would be quite tired, because sometimes what happens is you can really pick up some of the energy. But then the other way I look at that, if I'm picking up the energy of that, it's in my DNA for me to pick up, to learn something from. So when we went back, I let you continue the story then while we,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, this was just such an amazing adventure. First of all, it's a beautiful place. Surrounded by ash trees and holly trees, and you can feel these trees as the protectors. And it's got a beautiful wall. And the well itself, I've never seen a well like this, because it has its initial wellhead, and then it's like almost like a snake coming out, sort of, it's streaming out, and it's just so clear and beautiful. And so it's got this little stream coming through it. However, as soon as I walked in, there's a sort of a wall behind it, I think even a wall of ivy or something, and I immediately saw this very dark energy there. And I was like, oh, okay, yep, there's something here that's dark. And it didn't feel threatening, it didn't feel frightening, but it just felt like, yep, it's here. And then what was amazing was, it just began to unwind. I started to see the energy as an elderly man, and he was carrying the old church teachings of the very negative, the very vilifying against the feminine. And he was trying to stop the well, because he knew it was the feminine energy, but he was trying to cover it and saying, like, this is kind of evil, this is not good, this is, and I could see this. But then he realized I was an outsider, so to speak. I was not of the area. And on some level, I also represented the church coming in from the outside to the ancient wisdom and traditions. And he started to let go. And his healing just began to happen. And I could see him unwinding, and then him coming back to the original wisdom of the well. And deep inside him, he knew that wisdom, but because the church had overlaid the wisdom with, negative teachings, it got all confused within him and got bound. And the next minute, I'm literally seeing him lying in that stream, cleansing himself and saying how sorry he was for trying to stop the energy, and saying how sorry he was for being so negative to the feminine. And he was just being cleansed. And then the energy just started to lighten and lift. And I knew that I brought my sacred drum, and I had certain chants, Hebrew, Aramaic chants of the feminine, and I knew they needed to be chanted there. So we went over, and I know Rosaleen sat there right at the head of the well, and I was by the side. And I actually chanted to start with the chant for Magdalena, the chant of the full embodied feminine, the full sensual embodied feminine. And I just chanted and chanted, and it was like bringing alive that energy again, reinstating it within the well, within the land, within the story. And it was so powerful. And then we sat in the silence after that for some time, letting that just settle. And then I felt called to do the chant for the mother, Ama A Ima, a very gentle chant. And that chant to me, it was bringing in the tender healing of the mother for not just the well, but for all the people in the area. There was this tenderness, this healing, that any discord going on in the community, in the neighbors, in the land, was just being touched by this beautiful, tender energy. And when we looked, I know when I looked, that dark energy had completely disappeared. So for me, it was just such an honor. And I think, Rosaleen, you spoke of the need for the respect in the feminine. So I'll let you speak on
Yeah,
that.
and I think what helped me was that I think having you there helped me go, this is real, because I knew there was a problem there, but it was a bit like, well, each well has a different energy, and you need to have energy to do the work. You have to be in a certain zone to do it. But the good thing is that since we've been there, I've decided to do a talk for the local people at the well. And then that's another step in the healing, because what happens is they're also welcome back to the well. Because also, when you were talking about the church, part of the confusion in Ireland about the wells is that the in the 1700s there was a directive from the Vatican to convert the Irish using the wells. So the wells got merged into the ancient wisdom of the wells, was kind of blended in with the church. So there's a kind of a confusion in Ireland between, people think they're just church wells and they don't know they're pre-Christian, or then you have the more druid shamanic are angry at the church. So there's kind of a split in who goes to the wells, whereas I'm trying to have it where the wells are just the female energy for everybody, because the thing is, I'm not in either side. I'm saying these are for to ground down into our own female energy, and even things like some of the magical things that happen when we're looking for wells, where it would be nearly an impossible task, and we do find them, or somebody tells us, or we find an old map that nobody else has found, and we are guided in it as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know that we also visited a very sweet little wellhead, um, and it was to give clarity. So, and I know many of these wells, they speak of, that they're healing for the eyesight, but they're also, I know you said, to speak about that they're about spiritual seeing. So it's giving clarity of vision, clarity of the third eye, if you like, clarity for clear decisions. And I love that the water was so clear,
It was
so
so clear.
so
Yeah,
pure. There was a purity about it that I remember drinking it, and it was like you could feel the clarity and the purity like
yeah,
come into your body. So I think this is another aspect that we forget, that and that to me speaks of the joining of the material and the spiritual, of the body and the spirit, where there is no separation, just like you're saying, that actually there is no separation between the church and the druidic. Actually, in reality, if we come down into the deeper mystic understanding, the well is for everybody.
absolutely. And then I think the other the other maybe blessing I got from doing the wells is that I had to be in my body to do it. So I had to then deal with, well, what is the ancestral story in my body as
Mm.
well? So it's kind of, it's basically, it's not all just nice.
Yeah, right, right,
It's
right.
like, it's like if I could just get the nice, I mean, somebody said, well, you could just go and sit at a well. But I mean, we could spend, I mean, there's one well we're working on. We've been working on it for 2 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's now going to get done. But that's in the middle of a wind farm court case, and the locals are trying to help in this culture forests, and we got to create paths. I mean, it'll happen, but you learn patience because the thing is, the wells will only uncover themselves, or even to do with getting the water flowing. I can't make the water flow. The well
Right.
decides when the water's going to flow.
Mm.
So you
Mm-mm.
can't have your mind involved at all because otherwise you're going, well, we've dug the hole. Why isn't the water flowing?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I've also heard the well is described as the entrance to the womb of the earth and the wisdom of the deep earth, you know? So
Yeah. And the other world, the
the
fairy.
other world.
So things like the other thing that I got one time I was visiting a well, it was about using the water from the wells want the water to be used because going back in time, everybody took water from the well to bless. So so you could bless your car, bless your house, bless people when they're going on a journey. So what I do now is I get water from different wells and I use them in room sprays.
Ah,
So I'd use them in the clinic. So I'd actually make them up with oils with the well water, and I different well water has different energies.
yeah.
So even just getting the water from a particular well, it's got a very light energy. Now, I do it all the time at home. So if I come back from work and I know I have to clear my energy, I would spray the room with that spray. So it's a little bit like I know John O'Donoghue talks about what is a blessing?
Mm,
And it's basically an intention of good
mm,
towards a place or a person or an animal. So he was saying that even if you think a nice thought about somebody, energetically, that person is picking it up. Whereas if you're annoyed at somebody, energetically, and that's just life as well, things
yeah,
happen. But it's just
yeah,
more that tiny little blessings are kindness. But if you use water, which holds memory, so if you think of the memory is held in the water, there's a double blessing in it
right.
because it's got that connection of, so say for example, I mean, I remember my aunt, and we used to laugh so much as children. Every time we were going on a long journey, she would sit in front with my mother and she would splash all this water on us. We were in the back seat, so I think it was like water from Knock Shrine or something.
Right,
We'd all be like, we used to just laugh because we thought they were all crazy, but she had this ritual: you spray the car with water.
right, right.
Or people in Ireland had little water fonts inside the door, holy water fonts.
Yeah,
So you dipped your hand and did the blessing
yeah,
when
yeah,
you left the house.
yeah. And I love that. I've never thought of that to use the spray. That's fabulous. That's
Yeah,
fabulous. Well, maybe this is a good time to actually uh, do a blessing. Because I love this, and I think what I have here is the water actually in this little sacred bowl here from St. Fiac's Well, where Rosaleen and I went, where the chants were made, where the negative energy was cleared, and where I really felt the feminine. And I literally saw the energy of the snake, which of course the snake has been vilified by the church, but of course the snake is the original wisdom energy of the feminine as well. And also for Ireland, when they talk of snakes, it's also the druidic wisdom that can be
yeah,
represented by the snake.
absolutely.
So I would say let's bring that back, and bless ourselves with this water. And the blessing I do actually is a Gnostic blessing. And it's in the Hebrew Aramaic language, and it's actually an equal armed cross with a circle. So it's also very Celtic in its
Yeah.
way. And so I offer this for everybody, and it's Abba, Ima, Yeshua, Kara, Sophia. So we take in that well blessing, the ancient well blessing, and that Gnostic blessing, Abba, Father, Ima, Mother, Yeshua, Jesus, Kala, Magdalena as the full embodied bride, Sophia as the great cosmic wisdom that circles everything and every life form and is the great cosmic womb. So we give thanks to the wells themselves, to the guardians, the keepers of the wells, for their wisdom, and we pray for their healing, just as they are praying and initiating our healing, and we pray for the healing of the ancestors and our own healing, which comes right down into the bones of our bodies, our memories, that our inner eye may be cleansed, that our spiritual sight may come into a greater clarity. And especially in these times we are living, that the ancient earth wisdom may be given a place to rise and join with the heavenly wisdom to bring the feminine and masculine back into balance. So I think that I'd like to wish all of our listeners sacred journeys into your inner well, and to thank Rosaleen so much. I just love the work you're doing, and I have to say I had such a wonderful adventures with you. It was just fantastic. So Rosaleen, do you have a website that people can find you on?
Yeah, I'm RosaleenDurkin.com. So it's Durkin.
Okay, Rosaleen
RosaleenDurkin.com. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And anyone who's going to Glendalough can go on a contact Rosaleen to maybe go on a well adventure. So that would be lovely. So I'd also like to invite you to visit me on meghandawn.life to see offerings for Ireland Earth Meditations. My newly reprinted book, here it is, Feminine Courage, which is just a new reprinting of the new Divine Feminine. And look for any upcoming events or join the list for a pilgrimage to Ireland next year, goddess willing, that any of us will be able to travel. And you can come either as a group or as a solo retreat. And please do join me for the next podcast on Celtic saint stories. So be well, be strong, be happy of heart. Slán.